What is your scariest true story? Story 1. True story time. I was about 4 or 5 years old and my parents had just separated. My mom was living in a 2-bedroom apartment. I had my own room, but I preferred to sleep in her bed whenever I was staying with her. Our 2 bedrooms were at the end of a hallway, directly across from each other. Our apartment was on the first floor, and I remember that it was in the middle of the summer, and my mom had a window open in her room, which was directly behind the bed, above the headboard. Anyway, I woke up in the middle of the night and remember sitting up and seeing that our cat was sitting in the doorframe of my mom's room. Her door was open, and you could partially see into my bedroom. This was strange because our cat was typically always in bed with us. As I was watching him, he walked into my bedroom and meowed. I turned to face my mom and wake her up. In the 3 or 4 seconds it took her to wake up and ask me what was wrong, we both looked back up at the doorframe, and there was a man standing by my open door, making his way out of my bedroom. I still don't know how she managed to do it so quickly, but my mother proceeded to pick me up and literally throw me out of the screen window. Again, we were on the first floor, and it was maybe a 3-foot drop to the ground. She quickly followed, and we were able to start screaming for help, and someone called 911. The police came but didn't see any signs of forced entry, only that our front door was unlocked, which led them to believe the man must have exited that way. The strange thing was that my mom swore up and down that she had locked the door that night with the deadbolt and chain lock. About a week later, she was cleaning the kitchen and opened up our water heater closet and found a notebook with names and drawings, as well as a pair of gloves and some candy wrappers. The police were called again, but all they could do was speculate that the man had been in our house and hid until we were asleep. Story 2. A terrifying but true story I experienced when I was 12. I moved to my dad's when I was 10 and didn't know anyone in the area, except for the family my dad was friends with. A single mom with 3 kids. Luckily, there was a girl a couple of years older than me, 12 at the time I met her, and we got to know each other a little over a couple of years. We weren't close, but ended up having the same group of friends. One night, my friend Rob was hanging out with her and her younger brother. They happened to be in the house alone because my friend's mom was at work. This is where it gets terrifying and tragic. Her mother had been helping this one lady through her work and got to know her fairly well. She found out that the lady's sister had been in a mental institution and was recently released. The night Rob was hanging out with my friend, they got a knock on the door. My friend thought it was just their mom. She knocked a certain way when coming in and answered it without thinking. Rob wasn't supposed to be there, so he took off through the window to his house down the road. He never thought twice about it. It wasn't her mom, it was the sister of the woman her mom was helping. Through conversations with her sister, she figured out where the family lived and her mom's work schedule. She came in, and this is where I don't know the full details, and I'm glad I don't. My friend's younger brother got away to the neighbors to call the police. The woman committed a brutal act just a week before Christmas. She ended my friend's life in an unspeakable way. They later had to search through the presents to find evidence related to the case. I wasn't allowed to attend her funeral. Story 3. About 5 years ago, my mom started dating a guy she met on a dating site. That part is fine. I had recently started dating the woman who would later become my wife, and we had met online. I'll just refer to her as my wife for this story. Anyway, my wife and I never really liked this guy. We didn't think he was mean or anything like that, just a little strange. He was quiet, kept his eyes closed a lot, and occasionally said odd things, like offering my wife a chocolate and then popping one in his mouth, closing his eyes and making a weird noise as he let it melt in his mouth. One time, my wife and I were visiting my mom, but she got called into work, so we waited at her house. Her boyfriend was over, but he spent the entire time just hanging out in her bedroom with the door closed. Just before Christmas, my mom and this guy started having some difficulties. My wife and I were visiting her for the holidays, and she told us everything that was going on. We listened carefully and suggested that she would be better off without him. She had already made up her mind and decided to break up with him on Christmas Eve. We spent the night at my mom's and got up early on Christmas morning to visit my dad at his house. We didn't plan to spend the night there, but we got snowed in, which actually turned out to be a nice Christmas surprise. The next day we left as soon as we could get through the snow, and my wife suggested that we stop by my mom's house on the way to check on her. She just had a really bad feeling about my mom's now ex-boyfriend. My mom's car was in the driveway, But that didn't mean much because she often walked to work, and it hadn't snowed in her town. She also never locked her door, which drives me crazy, so we let ourselves in. That's when we saw what looked like blood oozing out of the refrigerator's water dispenser. It had filled up the spill container and was leaking onto the floor, creating a puddle. My wife screamed, and I freaked out. I fully expected to find something horrifying in the freezer. I nervously opened it, only to find a bag of frozen cherries that had been opened, crammed into the freezer in a way that caused them to melt over the ice dispenser. Story 4. I was sitting in my room after getting out of work on the second floor. My little brother was downstairs watching TV, and the dog was in the hallway outside my door sleeping. All of a sudden, the dog started making all kinds of noise, jumping around, barking, clacking nails, howling. I got up to see what was going on, and I heard, "Aw, that's a good girl," in a male voice. It didn't sound like my little brother, so I said, "Oh, you're home early," thinking it was my dad's friend, our roommate, as I opened the door. As soon as I stepped out, there was no one there at all, just the dog wagging her tail, staring at the empty end of the hallway. My little brother came upstairs to yell at me for getting his dog riled up. He said he heard the same voice and thought it was me or our roommate. We did a once-over of the house with my butterfly knife and his BB gun, and there was nobody. Still gives me chills to this day. Story 5. There's an abandoned house next to mine. The previous owner moved out to California 25 years ago and never sold it. I grabbed a flashlight, gloves, and pushed the window open and went inside, starting with the basement. In the basement was a grand piano. Still plays, but very much out of tune. Old World War II stuff, what seemed to be a signed Elvis poster, and other really cool things no one should ever leave behind. There's basically a whole story in that basement, including a broken wedding picture frame and instruments everywhere. On the main floor was an unmade bed, moldy food still in the fridge and on the stovetop, half-empty beers turned solid, lights that still hadn't been turned off. Then I started walking upstairs when I heard crying from one of the side rooms. That's when I totally panicked and haven't been back since. Story 6. A few years ago, I was home alone at night. I was watching TV in the living room when I heard the doorbell ring. Whenever I hear the doorbell, especially when I'm home alone, I'm cautious about answering it. I walked up to the peephole without turning on the porch light, so they wouldn't know if anyone was home or not, and looked through. It was really dark, but I could see a small figure, more like a black blob. I couldn't make out its shape, but it had to be around 3 to 4 feet tall, doing a dancing motion. It was dipping down and moving its arms outward. Think of a person moving their arms like wings gracefully. It was dark outside, but this figure was more opaque, so I could still see it. After a few seconds, I stopped looking through the peephole because it was too unsettling. I regained some courage and looked again, and whatever it was gone. To this day, I still don't know what that was, and I get freaked out just thinking about it. Story 7. This was in the late 80s or early 90s. I was around 6 or 7 years old. I was at home with my sister, who was about 14 or 15 at the time. We grew up in a small Texas town where everyone knew each other. We were home alone that night, and my parents often let my sister babysit me. We always got along well due to our age gap. It was about 8 p.m. in the winter. Deserts get pretty cold, so it was already dark. We were in the common room since that's where the TV was. We were watching 60 Minutes, 48 Hours, hard copy, one of those hour-long CBS news show that covered big crime stories, trafficking, murder, kidnappings. Basically like a gritty Lifetime special. This episode was about a quiet man who lived next door and went on a rampage at his neighbor's house, hurting them and kidnapping their daughter. The common room had a large glass door and a wall of floor-to-ceiling windows leading to the backyard. Beyond that was just darkness unless the back light was on. It wasn't. The front door was on the other side of the room, in a small entryway. It was a solid door so you couldn't see through it, but there was a glass storm door on the outside. About 45 minutes into the show, as they were talking about the ongoing manhunt for this man, bam, 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 the front door shook violently. We jumped up and screamed. Then silence. The only lights on were the kitchen light down the hall and the TV. We assumed maybe a planter or rocking chair on the porch had blown against the door. It was West Texas, known for crazy winds. A couple of minutes of silence passed. We were holding each other, shaking, trying to calm down. Then we heard the storm door on the outside of the front door slowly close. Someone had opened it earlier to knock like that. We froze. My sister crawled to the TV and turned it off. It was an old set. You had to turn the metal dial, which made a loud thunk. Now only the dim kitchen light remained. I don't remember how long we stayed frozen like that. Her crouched by the TV, me sitting on my feet. I turned around to face the back wall of windows and the glass door. That's when we heard, and I saw, the back doorknob turn. It was locked by the knob but not deadbolted. It rattled gently, as if someone was testing it. Then bam, 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 bam. Someone started violently shaking the door. The entire wall of windows vibrated. Each jerk made my faint reflection blur, then reappear, then blur again. My sister screamed at the top of her lungs. I was still frozen. She got up, dragged me into her bedroom, slammed the door, and shoved the mattress and anything else she could find in front of it. Luckily, she remembered the phone. One of those heavy beige plastic cordless phones with a long metal antenna. She panicked and couldn't remember the sheriff's number, so she hit redial. It was one of her friends. Through broken gasps, she told them someone was trying to get into our house and to come over immediately. I remember the profanity she used. That stuck with me more than anything. I curled up on the floor, shaking. We didn't hear anything else until we saw headlights, her friend and their parents arriving. We never found out who was at the door or why. There were no obvious signs except for a couple of scuff marks on the back door, which we couldn't remember being there before. Nothing like that ever happened again, but we never forgot to lock every door after that. Story 8. I'm a girl, and I live in a pretty big old house with 5 Navy guys. My room is by itself out in the detached garage. So one night, I'm sleeping out there, and in my dream, I assume, I'm hearing this loud rattling noise. I slowly start waking up, but I feel pretty out of it. I open my eyes and look around, and the noise continues. The door is about 3 feet from the end of my bed, and the doorknob is rattling like crazy. It almost sounds like someone is pounding on it, but I can't tell if it's someone knocking or someone just trying to open it. At this point, I realize I'm really awake, and this is not a dream. Even my Labrador, who never wakes up during the night, is up and staring at the door. I often used to forget to lock my door because we live in what seems like a pretty quiet neighborhood. But thankfully, I had started deadbolting it more regularly, maybe like a week before. Probably due to something I read on Reddit. I don't remember. I am terrified. I always hoped I'd be one of those people who responded better in a situation like this. But I was not. The door is still rattling, and I can see the motion light is on and shining through the window in my closet. All my blinds are closed. I am near tears, and I throw the blanket over my head and wait. I have literally nothing in my room to defend myself with except a flashlight, which I am holding onto tightly. I am paralyzed with fear and just sit there as silently as I can, curled up in the fetal position with my metal flashlight. A minute later, the noise stops, and I finally am able to move. I have a weird closet with a window at the top and a big bench. So I crawl in there, climb up on the bench, and poke my head up. A few seconds after that, the motion light goes out. I'd missed whatever was going on. I run back to my bed and begin thinking logically. I live with 5 guys. They often have people over late at night after going out downtown. I look at my watch, and it's 2:30, about the time they'd get home from the bars closing. Maybe someone was very intoxicated and just being stupid, right? So I text all my roommates, trying not to make a big deal of it or sound silly. Hey guys, are you up? Do you have people over? Someone was just outside my door trying to get in. I assume someone must be drunk or something. Kinda creepy. Less than 2 minutes after that, I hear the back door to the main house swing open. I hear whistling and banging, and my roommates are running around the backyard with baseball bats. Thankfully, one of them is a light sleeper, and he woke up and got another guy up. I open the door, run inside with my dog, and don't go back to sleep that night. My roommates spent the next couple of hours patrolling the house and watching out the windows. We never saw anyone, but they did find a pack of cigarettes lying in our backyard, along with a bag of food from Hardee's or something like that. More than likely, it was just someone trying to rob us. And because there were 6 cars in the driveway, they decided to go for the garage, where they probably assumed no one was, instead of the house, where they'd risk a confrontation. However, at the time, for all I knew, all my roommates had already been harmed and I was the last one. That's what I figured at the time anyway. Story 9. I have a few paranormal events that happened throughout my life. Most of them are pretty tame. But there is one that really got to me and still sticks with me today. About 4 years ago, I was ending my freshman year of college. I had lived in the dorms with an amazing roommate and had a great experience overall. Toward the end of my last semester, something felt different in our dorm hallway. We were all still our usual lively selves, but just walking into the dorm gave you this massive feeling of dread. We all wrote it off as the stress of finals approaching, but it just felt off. One night after studying, I decided to hit the shower so I could just wake up and head to class in a few hours. Before I go on, I should explain the layout of our hall and the bathroom. Our hall was one of many on a single floor. Each had 4 rooms that accommodated 2 people each, or a single room for the RAs. The entrance to the hall was a massive steel door with a small window at one end, and across from it was the bathroom. It seriously felt more like a prison block than a college dorm. As for the bathroom, when you walked in, there were 2 sets of sinks, 2 on each side on your left and right, with massive mirrors facing each other, creating that infinite mirror loop. Past that, there were 2 urinals and a toilet stall on your left and 2 showers on your right. When facing the left set of sinks, you could see into the showers from the mirror if the door was open. From the right sinks, you could see the reflection. The bathroom door was like the hall door, a massive steel frame with a small window that didn't allow for much of a view. It was held open with a giant wooden wedge that couldn't be moved easily. Back to the story. I was alone in the bathroom, getting ready to shower. I threw my change of clothes on the right side sink so I could grab them easily later. As I looked up into the mirror, I saw something shimmering inside the shower stall in the distance. It slowly got closer, like it was jumping through the mirror layers. Closer and closer. I felt uneasy but blamed it on the mix of Red Bull, Adderall, and caffeine. But the movement kept speeding up. As it got closer, I started making out some details. It looked like a dark mass covered in hair. I froze. As it reached the 4th layer, I saw it most clearly, and I wish I hadn't. It wasn't hair, but some kind of long, flowing veil. You could partially see through it, but from the torso down, it was just solid black. The face, I can't describe it. It was clearly human, but at the same time not. It had eyes, black but glowing somehow. I only saw this for maybe a second, but it's burned into my memory. Then the lights went out. I heard the door slam. The bathroom was pitch black. I couldn't see anything. I tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. That's when an overwhelming smell of blood hit me, and that's all I remember. I woke up later in the hospital. My RA said he was on his way to the bathroom and found me in the shower stall, my shirt covered in blood from a massive nosebleed. He tried asking what happened, and I apparently just said, "It saw me," over and over, panicking. He called an ambulance. They sedated me to calm me down. I came to as my parents arrived, understandably worried. I asked what happened. According to the doctors, they believed I had a seizure, but the CAT scans showed no signs of that, and epilepsy doesn't run in my family. I'd taken Adderall many times before, and since without anything similar happening, no hallucinations or seizures. To this day, I still can't look in a mirror for more than a minute. Being stuck in a room with one for too long makes me break down. I've been in therapy for 3 years. I've spoken with religious leaders who've mostly just told me to turn to God, but didn't recognize the experience as something demonic. And the weirdest part, there were no prior or later incidents in those dorms. Just that one isolated event. Story 10. I'll share mine. It didn't actually happen to me, but it happened to my mom when she was a teenager. My mom is now in her mid-60s. She's not an overly religious woman. She doesn't read the Bible regularly, rarely goes to church, but she prays every night because that brings her comfort. I should mention that we watch normal horror movies together every so often. Nothing too crazy or gory, but spooky stuff. One time I asked her if she wanted to watch The Exorcist, and she flat out 100% refused. She said there was absolutely no way she would ever watch anything related to possession or exorcisms. That made me curious. So when the movie Constantine came out, I showed her the trailer and asked if she wanted to watch it. She saw the girl near the beginning climbing the ceiling and refused again. I should also note, my mother will absolutely refuse and kick you out of the house if you even think about bringing a Ouija board into it. She'll yell, scream, and curse until you drop the subject. And that's that. This is important. All right, now that the backstory is out of the way, I ended up asking her why she was so against those kinds of movies. She told me that when she was a teenager, she went to a sleepover at a friend's house. They were playing games while the parents watched TV. Her friends and she were sitting on the floor playing a board game, a game my mom had never played before. Come to find out, it was a Ouija board, and she didn't know what it did. They started asking a bunch of questions and ended up contacting what they thought was a spirit. They asked it to show itself. Nothing happened. So they demanded it to show itself. That was the first sign that something was wrong, because all the lights in the house, every single one, including the TV, went out immediately and then snapped right back on. Spooky, huh? Just a fluke? They asked the next question. Who are you? The planchette moved around the board in big circles with their hands still on it and stopped at the letter D. Then E. Then V. I-L. Wow, someone must be messing with it. This can't be real, so they asked, if you are the devil, then show yourself. Nothing happened for a while. Then suddenly the TV shut off. In the reflection of the TV screen, right there next to them in the living room, my mom, her friends, and even her friends' parents saw the shape of something terrifying, just sitting there. The house went ice cold. Suddenly they heard loud noises in the kitchen, stuff flying off the top of the refrigerator, cupboards opening and slamming shut. They immediately stopped the game, closed it up, and threw it in the trash, never to play one again. Later that night, my mom was asleep and was awoken by loud clanging on the roof. She listened intently and could hear what sounded like chains and dogs up there. That made no sense. She figured it had to be outside somewhere. The next morning, she asked her friend's parents if any of the neighbors had dogs. They told her no, and that they also heard the dogs and chains on the roof that night. So that's the story of why my mom refuses to watch anything involving exorcisms. She truly believes the devil was there with them that night, sitting beside them. And the most disturbing thing is, every time she tells me this story, I get a cold shiver down my spine. There's no way she would be making this up. Story 11. One day while doing my laundry, one of the lights blew out in my basement. My basement is set up so that the laundry room is separated from the other side of the basement by a wall and a door. In order to get upstairs, you have to exit the laundry room and go through the other part of the basement. The light that blew was in the other part, not the laundry room, and since it was the only light on that side, it was incredibly dark. I finished the laundry I needed to do while dreading the walk through the dark basement. I exited the laundry room, got halfway through the basement, and that's when I heard a loud cackle. Imagine the sound people make when they imitate a witch. Now imagine that witch had been smoking for 50 years, making her voice deeper and rougher. That's what I heard. Clear as day, right behind me. I didn't hesitate. I bolted for the stairs. I waited until my father got home and then changed the bulb. I've never heard that cackle again, and I haven't told a single person in the house about it. Story 12. About 2 years ago, my ex and I went through a really nasty breakup. Lots of crying and awful things were said. It became clear that she had a lot of emotional issues and really wasn't the person I thought she was. There was a lot of anger and a lot of lying, as I later discovered. And to make it all more confusing, she was the one who ended the relationship multiple times, but was absolutely furious when I finally accepted it and told her it was time for her to go. I wasn't exactly perfect either, but that's how it goes. I had also started a new and healthy relationship at that point, maybe 3 weeks after the initial breakup, which made her even angrier. Anyway, she shows up one day to collect some of her things still at my place. She sits me down on the bed and hands me a note, telling me to read it out loud. It's a really hurtful letter saying I'm incapable of love, that I'm a terrible person, and that I deserve to die. I refused, but she started yelling, so I gave in and read it just to get her to leave. After I finished, she pulled a loaded gun out of her purse and spent the next 15 minutes trying to work up the courage to pull the trigger and end my life. She said she knew the law, knew she'd be caught, knew where she'd go, and was okay with it, because I'd be gone. So I spent those 15 minutes trying not to completely fall apart, tears streaming down my face, telling her she wasn't a killer and just needed to live her life without me. We ended that encounter with a hug, and I recently found out she got engaged to a new guy a couple of months ago. Story 13. So my grandparents, for some reason, had a way of always moving into haunted houses. The houses weren't really creepy, but they would always have weird paranormal stuff happen. To keep the story short, I'll share more if you want, but here is my experience. It was summer vacation, and I was around 13 or 14 years old. At this age, I always stayed up late, eating junk food and playing video games. Because of this, I could hear the vibration of anybody walking down the hallway. I was at the end of the hallway across from my grandparents, so if I heard someone walking, it would usually be my grandpa getting some Tums. It was a recognizable pattern, the sound of feet hitting the carpet as it made its way down the hall to the Tums, and then back to the bedroom. It would always end with hearing my grandpa close his bedroom door. Then I started to notice something. Randomly throughout the night, I would hear these footsteps. If it was any later than 1 a.m., I'd open the door, and nobody would be in the hallway. Staying rational, I assumed my grandpa just got into his bedroom before I saw him. So when hearing the footsteps, I would wait until they were at the other end, where the cupboard with the Tums was, then open the door. Nothing. Dark as the night could be. I got used to the sounds since they weren't super loud or anything. It was just footsteps on carpet. I kept thinking I was just hearing things half the time. One night, I was lying in bed, watching TV. The head of my bed shared the same wall as my bedroom door. I heard the footsteps. Whatever, no big deal. They made their way down the hall, then came toward my end. Cool, I was used to it. Could be my grandpa. Could be the ghost. But then the footsteps stopped, and my doorknob made a crazy clacking sound, as if someone was rapidly turning it without actually opening it. I jumped out of bed, ran to my door, and tried to catch whoever it was. My grandpa could be a prankster. Nothing. Dark as night, quiet as can be. I opened my grandparents' door slowly, and I was greeted with snoring. Story 14. My sister and I were playing outside when we were younger, and an elderly couple was walking by our yard. Our yard had a cemetery in the back, so it was quite a common local attraction for tourists, as this house was built in the 1800s, and most of the graves were from children who had passed away back then from illnesses like the flu. There are some creepy stories from that place, but nothing lives up to what happened all those years ago. We were outside playing, and this old couple kept pestering my sister about what her name was. As they approached us and got closer, we got scared. We were just little kids and ran inside to tell our mom what had happened. The following week, I heard a story on the news about an elderly couple who had approached a teenage girl, kidnapped her, and committed a horrific crime. It was the same couple that had approached my sister and me. Story 15. The first story is from when I was younger. We lived in an apartment complex that my mother managed. The day before Halloween, she was telling us all a scary story about how 2 little boys and their mom had passed away in the apartment above us, which was vacant, and how if you listened closely, you could still hear their footsteps running up and down the hallway. Well, at that very moment, what do we hear? The sound of running upstairs. The look on my mother's face was pure terror. She called the cop who patrolled the neighborhood and one of the on-duty maintenance guys, and they went into the apartment. Turns out a homeless mother had slipped in through an open window with her 2 children and had been living up there for some time. My mother never told another ghost story again. Second story. Different complex, also managed by my mom. I was a bit older. She was checking out vacant apartments to see if anything needed fixing before showing them. I went with her, since no maintenance guys were working that day. We went through a few apartments. Everything was normal, until we got to one where the door just opened. No need to turn the knob. The lock had been broken. I chalked it up to neighborhood kids and didn't think much of it. I stood in the living room area looking outside while my mother went to the master bedroom. Then I heard her scream. I sprinted back as fast as I could, and there in the closet was a girl, pale as snow, half-dressed, and with her nails dug into the wall. My mom told me to get help, so I turned to go to the main office to get the security guard. And what do I see? A man about 6 feet 3 inches running out of the kitchen, right where I had been standing. I chased him for about 400 to 500 feet before I lost sight of him. The girl was in the middle of being attacked when we walked in. Story 16. When I was a kid, the thing I hated the most was taking my clothes downstairs to the basement and placing them in a big pile next to the laundry machine so my mom could wash them. That side of the basement was unfinished, and it absolutely terrified me. I had so many nightmares about the place. Crazy recurring nightmares that I'd recognize as they were happening, but I was never able to escape them. One of the nightmares was that I would be up and around the house with no one else home, and then I would become aware that it was approaching the time. I don't know what time it was, but I could feel it in my bones that something bad was about to happen. So I'd get under the kitchen table. The door to the basement was in the kitchen, and then the basement door would open, and I could see the legs of some man. I never knew who it was and never saw his face, but I knew that if this thing caught me out in the open, it would do terrible things to me. The worst part was the thought that it knew I was under the table, but enjoyed the fact that I was so afraid, hiding there, trying not to be seen or heard. Sometimes, either at the end of an unrelated dream or on its own, I'd be walking down the stairs into the basement, and when I stepped off the last step, I was plunged into total darkness, and something would grab me. I can't explain the terror that produced in me, especially knowing at the top of the stairs what was about to happen and not being able to stop walking. There were other disturbing dreams like that, all about or set in the basement. I hated that place. One day when I had to take my laundry down, I was home alone except for my dog. I figured it would be better to have her down there with me than to go alone. I grabbed my laundry, called the dog, and headed down the stairs. It was daylight. Light was streaming down the stairs and into the basement through these small slit windows, and nothing seemed scary. I walked over to the machine, casually tossed my clothes onto the pile, and started making my way back up the stairs. Previous boldness aside, I always ran up the stairs because I hated the basement. I was a scrawny kid, so you could barely hear my feet tapping as I climbed. Suddenly, all I could hear was insane thudding and scrambling, coming up the stairs behind me. My brain nearly shut down. I screamed in terror, my heart pounding in my chest, and I couldn't even keep moving. I fell onto the stairs and curled up into a ball. Can you imagine growing up being told monsters aren't real, and then facing the moment where your worst nightmare is about to reach you in your own home? I shut my eyes as tight as I could and waited. Then my dog started licking my face, excited to be playing a fun new game called Race You Up the Stairs. Story 17. I have some stories that really scare me, but I'm not sure how others will react, because it's not your mind that has to carry them. Shortly after graduating from high school, I woke up one morning and found my father unresponsive in our living room. I tried giving CPR, but he was already gone by the time I got there. I suffered from PTSD after this and regularly had nightmares where I would be walking toward the living room, knowing what I was about to see. I'd start screaming before I even got there, and then I'd wake up screaming. This lasted about a year. I wasn't functioning. I would stay awake for days just to avoid experiencing that nightmare again. Then one day I had a mental break in the middle of the day. According to my girlfriend, who is now my wife, I tensed up like I was having a seizure for about an hour. In my mind, I kept reliving that morning over and over. I would stop myself before entering the living room and let out a primal scream. My wife said I was doing that in real life as well. Eventually, I let myself walk into the room and see my father's body. After that, the nightmares stopped. Flash forward to 2005. I had joined the army and was in Iraq. I was leading a convoy, and we had intel that children were sometimes sent in front of convoys to force them to stop, leading to ambushes. As I was driving, a kid ran out about 300 meters ahead of us, and I froze. We had orders not to stop for anyone. My truck chief was screaming at me to go, so I did. And the kid dodged out of the way at the last second. When we got to the next fob, I tried to get some sleep, but I was haunted by the choices I had almost made. I had a nightmare where I was driving again, and the same kid jumped out. But this time, I didn't stop. I ran him over, then overwhelmed by horror, I got out to check the body. As I walked around the back of the truck, I felt that same dread I used to feel. Somehow in my mind, I remembered my old nightmares and tried to reassure myself this was different. But as I got to the back of the truck, I saw my father's body again and went straight into the same primal scream. I woke up screaming and running, literally in a full sprint, somewhere in the FOB I didn't recognize. I haven't had those nightmares again, thankfully, but I still live in constant fear of what my own mind is capable of. Story 18. I was with my boyfriend at the time. We were lying in my bed with the lights out. We weren't talking, just both lost in thought. All of a sudden, he rolled over and hugged me really tightly. I, of course, hugged him back, but then this feeling just hit me. If I hadn't already been lying down, it would have knocked me over. It was a total sense of dread and panic. I'll admit, I've had panic attacks in the past, but this wasn't the same. I hugged my boyfriend back as hard as I could. I had never felt anything like this before. My boyfriend is always really warm, but even in his arms I felt ice cold. I could feel this awful dark presence, and it seemed like it was coming from the corner of my room. It was kind of like sensing someone behind you when they haven't said anything. I honestly believe there was something evil, something not human in my room. I got the courage to speak and said, "Jay, do you feel that?" And he said he did. The cold, terrible feeling. This all happened in about 30 seconds to a minute. He decided to call his friend who was studying to be a youth pastor. I got up and turned the lights on, then came back to bed. He called Matt and put him on speakerphone. Matt prayed for us, and we both closed our eyes and listened, praying silently along with him. When the prayer was done, the room felt lighter. It wasn't cold anymore. But after a little small talk, Matt asked, "Were you two talking while I was praying?" We were like, "Of course not. We were just listening." He said he heard, through the phone, a deep, gravelly voice telling him to stop. And he said he felt an overwhelming evil energy while he was praying. It completely freaked me out. My boyfriend drove home right after because he was super shaken. I was kind of mad he wouldn't stay with me since I was scared too. I went into my dad's room to tell him I thought something evil had come into my room. He was half asleep and just muttered something about having a gun and how he'd take care of it. So yes, I'm convinced something dark came into my room, but it never returned. Still, why did it come in the first place? That's what bothers me. What was it trying to do? I don't think I'll ever know. Ever. Story 19. So, I don't know if this is exactly scary, but it freaks me out. I live close to a Walmart, so when I need to go, I just walk there. But the trail takes you behind the store, and then you have to walk along the side to get to the front. There's a forest-like area that wraps around the back and side of the store. One night, my boyfriend and I were walking to get stuff for root beer floats. As we were heading up the trail, we saw a black dog sniffing around. It was dark, and I jokingly said, "What if it's some sort of creature?" And right at that exact moment, the dog whipped its head around, looked at us, and then took off running at a speed I've never seen a dog move before. I mean like The Flash level speed. It was strange. A couple of months later, my neighbor told me that she and her son had seen a creepy black dog roaming around the back of Walmart. Okay, it couldn't be the same one, right? Just a coincidence. But then she told me that when it saw them, it ran away at a speed that didn't seem natural. Then a few weeks later, my boyfriend came home in a panic and said he saw the same dog again. Here's the weird part. It's not black the way a regular dog is black. It's black in a way that looks like an absence of light, like a void in the shape of a dog. That's the best way I can describe it. Just wrong. Story 20. When I was about 8 or 9, my family lived in a house tucked away in a little hidden neighborhood on a cul-de-sac. It had a huge backyard, but in one corner, there was a rusted-out trailer, the flat kind you use to tow dirt bikes. That part of the yard always gave us the creeps, so we never went over there. Neither did our dog. My 2 younger sisters shared a room, but they would come sleep in mine every once in a while because they said there were weird lights in their room. My parents brushed it off, saying it was just the street lights. One night, I woke up with this intense feeling of anger, like when you're standing next to someone who is extremely mad at you. There was a figure in the doorway and a single red glowing light, like the cherry of a cigarette. Both my parents smoked, so I thought it was one of them. I sat up and said, "Mom? Dad?" but got no response. Then the figure and the red light were gone. I pulled the covers over my head as fast as I could and curled into a ball. Then I felt a tug at the blankets near my feet. I pulled them back up, and then there was another tug. I was terrified, frozen, just gripping the blankets as hard as I could. Eventually the tugging stopped, and I must have fallen asleep. When I asked my parents about it the next morning, they both said they were asleep all night. They told me it must have been a nightmare. Fast forward about 20 years. I used to have recurring nightmares about that house, especially about the corner of the garage turned den. In my dreams, it looked like a black hole. It was a 1-story house, but in my dreams, I'd be running downstairs into the den, and I knew that if I got too close to the black hole, something evil would get me. I also had dreams about other houses in the neighborhood being evil, and if I went to them for help, I'd die. One night, my younger sister and I were talking with our mom about the house. and she described having almost the exact same nightmares. We'd never spoken about it before. In her dreams, she would run downstairs into the kitchen, where the cupboards would be opening and closing on their own, and there would be a man standing in the den, near where I saw the black hole. Needless to say, all three of us were completely creeped out. I've driven past that house a few times over the years and still get an eerie feeling every time I enter that neighborhood. Maybe it was built on something cursed. Who knows? Story 21. When I was about 8 or 9, we lived in a house that my father built for us in the middle of nowhere, Indiana. My parents owned a small business that often brought clients to our remote little homestead, and over the years we met some rather odd people. One such person was a strange man who gave me a bad feeling the moment I saw him. He arrived in a black car with tinted windows, wearing all black, including a hat and dark sunglasses. His demeanor was strange, and he seemed very interested in our black Persian cat named Mercedes. Nevertheless, he left after his consultation with my parents. But later at dinner, everyone admitted he made them feel uneasy. That night, Mercedes suddenly became very ill. A few days later, after an illness that the local vet couldn't diagnose, one that included the cat vomiting what looked like black tar, Mercedes passed away. In her final moments, she would swat and hiss at something in the air. I'll never forget the chill I got when she took her last breath. After that, strange things started happening around our home. We'd find footprints in the snow that started and stopped out of nowhere. There were noises in the middle of the night, and wallpaper would be torn halfway off the walls. My mother, who has always been somewhat sensitive to this kind of thing, claimed to see demonic figures around the house and became rather withdrawn. I had asthma, but I hadn't had an attack in a long time. Soon after all of this started, I began having episodes again. One night I was especially sick, so I slept on the floor next to my mother's side of the bed in my parents' room. Under the bed and around the room were boxes, family photos, wrapping paper, and other things we'd been meaning to move elsewhere. In the middle of the night, I had a really bad asthma attack. I heard my mother scream, "Get away from her!" and try to get to me. Every box from under the bed and around the room had been stacked between me and my mother, preventing her from reaching me. She finally got to me and gave me my inhaler. She cried all night. She never told me what she saw that night, but the strange activity continued for several more months. We had the house blessed and tried everything we could. Eventually, it started to settle down. My brother and his family live in the house now, and they still hear unexplainable sounds from time to time, but nothing like what we experienced that winter. I grew up to be quite a skeptic, but I still can't explain what happened that year. I just tell myself it was all in our heads. Story 22. Not really a scary story, just very unexplained. The details are a little hazy. I had been drinking a lot, but I was down in Toronto for a concert. Long story short, I got stopped by the police, and they arrested me and said they were taking me to the drunk tank. Not a big deal. I was very intoxicated and had been there before. I passed out in the back of the car, forgot to mention it was an unmarked vehicle, kind of relevant. And when they woke me up, we were at some building that looked more like a warehouse, not the police station. Anyway, we go inside, and it looks like a hospital. The officers leave me there and people come up and start taking my blood, but like weird amounts, more than you would normally draw. I wasn't worried at all because I was absolutely out of it, but then it started to get strange. The nurse-looking people led me to a bedroom where I guess I was supposed to sleep. Some bouncer-type guy slammed me on the floor, threw me into bed, and strapped me in, like 7 or 8 straps across my body. At this point, I started to panic. I was left alone in a pitch-black room, strapped down and unable to move. Eventually, I passed out. Here's where it gets really weird. I woke up in the bushes beside a Burger King. I wasn't robbed. I still had my phone and my wallet with $15 in it. To this day, I have no idea what happened. My friends think I was drugged, but I swear, it all felt real. Story 23. Not my story, but my Nana's, and it still freaks me out. My Nana had a very good friend from her nursing days. Years later, when they both had grown kids, that friend's ex-husband called my Nana. He was very depressed and needed someone to talk to. But my Nana had just had a newborn, my father, and she was breastfeeding and couldn't leave. She told him she was sorry but couldn't come. He said he understood and said, "I'll see you soon then." My granddad was working a night shift, so she wasn't expecting anyone home until morning. Around 9 p.m. that night, she heard the front gate open. It was a very vocal gate. She liked it that way, so she'd know if anyone came while she was alone. She thought maybe Granddad forgot something and had come back. But then the family dog, Ben, stiffened up and growled at the front door. Nobody opened it. Then Ben started barking. He'd never behaved like that before. He was a very calm, gentle dog raised around 4 kids. She tried to get up to see what was happening, but she couldn't move. She was frozen in her chair. She said she felt ice cold for about 2 minutes, even though the fire was blazing. Then the cold faded and she suddenly felt very calm. She heard the front gate again. In the morning, when Granddad came home, she told him what happened and what time. He told her he had terrible news. Her friend's ex-husband had taken his own life around 8:50 p.m. that evening. It was about a 10-minute walk to my Nana's house from his. Story 24. About 10 years ago, when I was 19, I was close friends with a girl who was also interested in the paranormal. She bought a Ouija-type board called Psychic Circle. It had words, photos, symbols, and a booklet explaining how to interpret everything. We never had much luck with it. One night she brought it to her aunt's house and said they had an intense experience with it. Her aunt asked to keep it for a few nights to use it on her own. My friend agreed, and we planned to visit that weekend to try it together. That Friday night, as soon as I got in the car, I felt a sense of dread. I'd had paranormal experiences before and wasn't easily scared, but this was different. I just felt something was wrong. We got to her aunt's house, and her aunt pretty much disliked me the second I walked through the door. The dread got worse inside. I tried to brush it off as paranoia. Her aunt brought out the board, and it looked ancient, weathered like it had been left in the sun for years. The bright colors were faded. My friend asked, "What happened to the board?" Her aunt said it had been sweating. She put the board on the table, looking at me with suspicion. I was terrified. My palms were clammy and shaking. I placed my hands on the oracle, and her aunt said, "No." I took them off, and she said, "They don't like you. They won't answer your questions. I can just tell." We left soon after. My friend was upset. It was all very out of character for her aunt. She refused to return the board. I eventually bought my own, but had no luck with it either. I took that as a sign and gave it away to other friends. Story 25. 6 years ago, when I was 19, I was spending the night at my 2 best friends' house. All 3 of us were sleeping on the bed, and I woke up in the middle of the night. There was a girl around 6 or 7 years old standing at the foot of the bed looking at us. I was so freaked out, I just kept staring at her. I was too scared to move or say anything. Then she slowly faded away. I swear this really happened, but I'm not sure if it was a ghost or if I was somehow semi-awake and dreamt it. It was the scariest thing I've ever experienced, regardless of whether it was my imagination or a real ghost. I didn't tell my friends for a couple of months because I couldn't believe it myself, so I figured they definitely wouldn't. Then a few months after I saw the girl, they were telling me how one night they were in their room and heard children laughing in the living room. They went to the bedroom door to listen more closely, and when they got to the door, there was a loud thunk, like someone hit it. They ran out of the room thinking someone had broken into the house, but after checking everything, no one was there, and all the doors were still locked. That's when I told them about the girl I saw. Story 26. When I was young, probably around 8 to 11 years old, my sister, who was 7 years older than me, would babysit me when our parents were out. At the time, she smoked a lot, and our parents made her smoke outside, of course. So I'd follow her outside into the carport, which faced the street, and play around, annoy her, and just hang out. One day, my sister noticed a car sitting at the end of our driveway. It was a white SUV, maybe a mid-90s Bravada or something like that, with a bike rack on top. It had the darkest tinted windows I've ever seen. You couldn't see inside at all. It sat there while she was outside, but as soon as she went back in, it would drive down to the church parking lot and wait. When she came back out for another smoke, it would return and sit at the end of the driveway again. It was strange, but my sister was a brave person and tried to ignore it, until the next day. My parents were out again, and the SUV came back. It would just sit there, watching. I don't know what the driver was doing, but if I stayed inside, I'd watch from the window, and it would always just sit there, watching my sister. She told my father, who was a sheriff's deputy at the time, and he made a report. The local police showed up, looked around, but the SUV was nowhere to be found. Months went by, and then one day, about 9 months after it first started, and 4 months since the last sighting, it returned and became a regular thing again. One day my sister was outside smoking, and sure enough, it showed up again. We were alone as usual. She told me to stay in the carport while she went to confront them. She started walking toward the SUV, but later told us, "I felt utter terror, like I knew if I went any further, I was dead. I was paralyzed by pure fear." She turned around and came back inside. Finally, one night, our family car was in the shop, so we were all stuck at home. We had to order delivery and stay in. While our parents were home, my sister went outside for a smoke. I went with her, and eventually the SUV showed up again. She told me to run inside and get my dad. I did. My dad grabbed his gun and walked down the driveway, calm but firm, not pointing it but holding it in plain view. The SUV floored it down the road and peeled out onto the highway. My dad, being a cop, noted the year, make, model, and key features. The creepiest part? The license plate had been completely covered with duct tape. We never saw that SUV again. My sister just kind of shrugs it off now. Story 27. The only time I was truly creeped out was during one visit to my parents' house. It was 2009, and I was visiting them during a break from college. They had moved into this house the year after I left for school, and it always kind of gave me a weird vibe. It was bigger than where they'd lived before. 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, and a 2-car garage. I was napping downstairs in the living room on the couch around 1 p.m. It was a bright, sunny day. I woke up to the sound of a doorknob jiggling upstairs. The doors in the house had those push-in and turn locks. My dad, unfamiliar with that type, had accidentally locked himself in the bathroom a few times before, which we always found both funny and frustrating. It was strange that the sound woke me up because I'm a heavy sleeper. I assumed my dad came home on his break. It was only about a 10-minute drive from work, so I went upstairs to help him out. But when I got there, none of the doors were locked. They were all wide open and nobody was there. I was a little creeped out, but figured it must have been a dream or something in my head. I went back downstairs, turned on the TV, and pretty much fell asleep again. Then I woke up a second time, and this time I knew I heard the knob jiggling violently upstairs. It was loud enough to be heard over the white noise from the TV. I immediately got freaked out. I called both of my parents on my cell to check if either had come home early. Both of them were still at work. I sat there in silence for a few moments with the TV off, trying to decide whether to check upstairs again. Then I said nope and got out of the house. It's the only time I've been truly creeped out at 2 p.m. on a sunny Saturday. Story 28. I grew up in a house on Long Island in the town of Brentwood. It was a quiet town for its location. My dad worked as a taxi driver at the time, which meant he would usually end up coming home early in the morning, and I would greet him. So it's Saturday, I'm watching cartoons, and my dad comes in. I run to say hello. My mom hears us from the bedroom and says, "Hello, honey, don't go in the pool. It's not ready yet." My dad and I both thought that was weird. It was 6 a.m., and we weren't even thinking about the pool. But we brushed it off, and he went on to tell me his usual stories about the crazy passengers he picked up through the night. Then we realized it was Saturday, and my mom was at work. It was only me and my dad in the house. The voice sounded just like my mother. Fast forward a couple of weeks, we had just moved into the house, and our new neighbors came over to welcome us to town. It was 2 mothers, 2 sons, one my age, one a little older, maybe in 10th grade, and 2 little girls, one blonde and one shy brunette who didn't talk much. We started playing soccer, but the little brunette girl was nowhere to be found. Being the curious kid I was, I ran around the property and found her playing in the woods, a dangerous area for little kids to be exploring. She asked me to come play tag, but I declined, wanting to get everyone else in on the game. The reactions I got when I told the others about her were puzzling, especially the mom's response. "We only have one daughter." Turns out a small brown-haired girl had drowned in the pool 10 years ago. The mother passed away from a heart attack soon after. The following 5 to 6 years were terrifying for everyone. I have a huge number of stories from that house. Just message me if you want to hear more. Story 29. I suffer from sleep paralysis from time to time, and it's very common for people with sleep paralysis to experience hallucinations when they wake up. The thing is, whenever I have sleep paralysis, I always hallucinate the same thing every time. I'd slowly wake up, hearing whispers all around me. Nothing clear, but audible, and feel this great pressure on my chest like someone was pressing down on me. I'd open my eyes and see this little girl wearing an old white lace dress with long black hair, sitting on me with her back facing me. What makes it worse is that she would slowly start to turn her head backwards to face me, and the whispering would get louder and louder while she did it. I always closed my eyes before I could see her face, but the pressure on my chest would get heavier, and the whispering would become almost deafening. Then silence, a very unnerving silence. I'd slowly regain motor control of my body, but I've still never opened my eyes after that. I'd force myself to go back to sleep. It's happened to me over a dozen times, and I hate it so much. It's not a true story in the traditional sense, but it's a real thing that happens to me at least once a month, and it's awful. Story 30. When I was maybe 12, give or take a year, my parents were having upgrades done to the exterior of our house. New windows and siding mostly. I was in bed one night when I woke up because I heard noise outside my window. My bedroom was on the second floor of the house, and the bed was against the wall with windows along the length of it. At first, the noise sounded like someone throwing rocks at the window. Because of the construction equipment outside, ladders and whatnot, I tried to convince myself that something was blowing against the house. But every few minutes, I'd hear more noise, enough that I became pretty sure someone was climbing a ladder. I took the classic approach of lying completely still, because that's how scary things go away, right? That worked until there was definite knocking or scratching on my window. I remained frozen with fear until it sounded like someone was trying to open the window. That's when I jumped up and bolted to my parents' room, literally the next room over, and woke up my dad. I think there's someone outside my window. It took him a few seconds to wake up, but he got up and checked things out. Turned out, it was my brother. He had snuck out and locked himself out and was trying to wake me up to let him back in without our parents knowing. It did not work out the way he hoped. My second story happened during spring break in my junior year of college. My parents had divorced by then. My dad had moved out, and my mom was basically living with her now husband, so I was living alone in the house when I came home. Well, just me and my little mini dachshund. One night I was watching TV in the den when my dog started barking from the other room. I called her over, assuming she was barking at random sounds like she often did, but she wouldn't stop. I poked my head out to see what was going on and found her standing on her hind legs with her paws up on the windowsill, barking like crazy. She wouldn't come to me when I called. This window overlooked a large yard, big enough that we could have sold it for someone else to build a house. It was surrounded by hedges, so it wasn't like she could have been barking at someone walking by. And it was pitch black out, so it was strange that she could see anything at all. I was alone in a big house, already kind of paranoid, and now I'm freaking out because clearly something was out there. I grabbed my phone, typed in 911, and hovered over the send button. I slowly made my way to the window, where my dog was still losing it. When I finally reached the window, I peeked out, while trying to stay hidden, of course, in case the intruder was looking in. And there it was, a white plastic grocery bag floating around in the wind American Beauty style, catching just enough moonlight to be visible. That's what my dog was freaking out about. Story 31. Back when I was about 6 or 7, we were visiting my aunt for Christmas. She had recently divorced her husband, who was a hot-headed Czechoslovakian guy that had started to go a little off the deep end. He had called the house multiple times over the past few days, threatening my aunt, but nothing had ever come from it. My parents and I had just immigrated to Canada, where this story took place, so we were spending the night at my aunt's before our house was ready. My aunt was sitting in the den when she looked up and saw her ex coming toward the house with a hunting rifle. She screamed, and my dad, with nerves of steel, flew into action, locking the door and rushing me, my aunt, and my mom upstairs, where he locked us in a room. We pushed a dresser in front of the door, while my dad grabbed a buck knife and ran back downstairs. The rest of the story I only know from being told later. My mom called the police from the upstairs phone, but my aunt's ex had already busted open the front door near where my dad was hiding. My dad jumped him, and they got into a fistfight in the foyer until the police showed up. I know the ex dropped the rifle when he got hit, but I'm not sure what happened to the knife. To this day, my dad won't confirm whether he used it. The police arrested my aunt's ex, but the scariest part was that, during their sweep of the property, they found his father hiding in the backyard with a knife. He was an old, abusive drunk who hated my aunt and had been waiting, hoping we would run outside.